Standing here on the vast, wind-swept Salisbury Plain, with the grass whispering secrets under an immense sky, it's almost impossible not to feel a profound sense of awe. Before you rises a circle of colossal stones, some weighing more than 25 tons, arranged with a precision that defies simple explanation. This is Stonehenge. But to call it just a monument is to miss the point entirely. This is a 5,000-year-old question mark carved into the earth, a silent, enduring puzzle that has captivated the human imagination for millennia. Every single stone holds a story, and every empty space between them echoes with theories about who built it, and more importantly, why. It's a place where history feels alive, breathing mysteries into the present day. For centuries, the greatest minds in archaeology, history, and even astronomy have stood right where we are imagining, trying to crack its code. They've mapped its alignment with the sun and the stars, carbon-dated the bones buried nearby, and meticulously studied every chip and groove on the massive sarsen stones. Yet, for every answer we seem to find, a dozen new, more perplexing questions emerge. This isn't a mystery that's been solved. It's one that has only deepened with time, pulling in thinkers from every conceivable field and giving rise to some of the most incredible and sometimes outrageous ideas ever conceived. The very fact that we are still debating its purpose is a testament to the sheer genius, or perhaps the utter strangeness of its creation, and that is precisely the journey we are embarking on today. We are going to move beyond the standard textbook explanations and dive headfirst into the extraordinary. We have gathered 25 of the most mind-bending theories ever proposed about Stonehenge. We will explore ideas that range from the brilliantly logical to the spectacularly fringe. Was this an ancient, sophisticated astronomical calculator? A massive stone computer designed to predict eclipses and mark the seasons with uncanny accuracy? Or could it have been a sacred healing ground, a Neolithic Lourdes where the sick traveled for miles seeking a miracle? And then, of course, we have the theories that push the boundaries of belief altogether, suggestions that this site was a landing pad for extraterrestrial visitors, a powerful energy vortex, or even a portal to another world. So prepare yourself to have everything you thought you knew about history challenged, because we are about to unravel the enigma, one astonishing theory at a time. Our first theory takes us back to the very foundations of scientific inquiry into Stonehenge, and it remains one of the most compelling explanations for its existence. This idea proposes that the stone circle was, in essence, a Neolithic astronomical computer. Forget silicon chips and digital screens. This was a monumental machine built from earth and stone, designed to calculate the movements of the heavens with breathtaking accuracy. The central clue lies in the very architecture of the site, specifically its precise alignments with the sun. On the longest day of the year, the summer solstice, if you stand within the circle and look towards the northeast, you will witness the sun rising directly over a single, isolated slab known as the heel stone. This is not a coincidence. Similarly, during the winter solstice, the sun sets perfectly framed within the great trilithons, the iconic three stone arches at the heart of the monument. These alignments are too exact, too deliberately engineered to be the result of random chance. This concept was brought into the modern spotlight in the 1960s by an astronomer named Gerald Hawkins. He didn't just look at one or two alignments. He used an early computer to analyze dozens of potential relationships between the stones and key celestial events. Hawkins famously argued in his book, Stonehenge Decoded, that the monument could predict not just solstices, but also eclipses by tracking the more complex cycles of the moon. He saw the Aubrey holes, the ring of pits just inside the bank, as a kind of counting mechanism. While some of his specific eclipse predictions are debated, his core idea revolutionized our understanding. He demonstrated that the builders possessed a sophisticated, long-term understanding of the cosmos. knowledge that would have been power in an agricultural society. Knowing precisely when the seasons were about to change was a matter of survival. It dictated when to plant crops, when to harvest, and when to move livestock. But this was likely more than just a farmer's almanac carved in stone. For a society that saw the sun as a deity, a life-giving force that waned and grew throughout the year, tracking its journey would have been a deeply sacred act. The solstices were probably times of massive gathering, of powerful ceremonies led by a priestly class who alone understood the complex celestial mechanics. The ability to command the sun to return, to mark the pivotal moment when the days would begin to grow longer again, would have bestowed immense authority upon them. The construction itself is a testament to that organization. To haul 80-ton sarsen stones from 20 miles away and arrange them with such painstaking celestial precision speaks of a society capable of marshalling thousands of people over generations, all united by a shared, profound understanding of their place in the universe. This theory paints a picture of our ancestors not as primitive hunter-gatherers, but as keen astronomers and master engineers. But if the astronomical computer theory represents a quest for cosmic order, our next idea delves into something far more personal and profoundly human: the universal need for healing. This theory suggests that Stonehenge was not a place for observing the heavens, but for mending the body and soul, a prehistoric lurch that drew pilgrims from across the land. The evidence for this is written not in the alignment of the stones, but in the bones buried in the surrounding landscape. Archaeological excavations have uncovered a significant number of human remains dating from the time of its construction, and many of these individuals show clear signs of severe trauma and debilitating disease. We find skeletons with broken bones that have badly healed, evidence of advanced infections, and even signs of primitive brain surgery. What's truly remarkable is that analysis of the teeth of these individuals using a technique called strontium isotope analysis reveals that many of them were not from the local area. They had traveled, often from very distant parts of what is now the United Kingdom, some journeying hundreds of miles to reach this specific spot. This pattern strongly suggests that Stonehenge was a destination, a place of last resort for those who had exhausted all other options. The central element in this healing narrative isn't the giant sarsen stones that form the famous outer circle, but the smaller inner ring of blue stones. These stones have a unique and fascinating history all their own. Geologically, they are completely different from the local sarsens. They come from the Preseli Hills in South Wales, over 150 miles away. Transporting these multi-ton stones to Salisbury Plain would have been a Herculean task, requiring an immense communal effort to drag them overland and possibly float them on rafts along the coast. Why would a Neolithic society go to such extraordinary lengths? The theory posits that these blue stones were believed to possess powerful, magical healing properties. Perhaps their unique spotted dolerite composition, which can sparkle in the light, or their unusual ringing sound when struck, led people to believe they were imbued with life-giving energy from the earth itself. The journey to bring them to Stonehenge, then, was an act of faith, a way to concentrate this perceived power at a sacred location that was already significant. Imagine the scene during a gathering. The air would be thick with smoke from ritual fires, filled with the chants of shamans or healers. The sick and injured would be brought into the circle, perhaps to touch the blue stones or to drink water that had been poured over them, absorbing their curative essence. This wouldn't have been healing as we understand it today, based on science, but a powerful combination of spiritual belief, community support, and the psychological impact of a grand pilgrimage. The very act of traveling such a great distance to a place renowned for its power could itself inspire a potent placebo effect, a will to believe in a cure. In this light, Stonehenge transforms from a cold, calculating observatory into a place of profound hope and human vulnerability. It becomes a monument to suffering and the enduring desire to overcome it, a sanctuary where the boundaries between medicine, magic, and faith were seamlessly blended in a desperate collective search for renewal. Moving from the idea of a place of healing, we encounter a theory that is grounded in perhaps the most tangible evidence of all the remains of the people who are laid to rest here. This perspective paints Stonehenge not as a place for the living to gather, but as a final resting place for the dead, specifically a sacred burial ground for a powerful royal dynasty. The landscape itself tells this story. If you look beyond the famous stone circle, the rolling hills of Salisbury Plain are dotted with hundreds of ancient burial mounds known as barrows. These are not random graves, they form a vast necropolis, a city of the dead, with Stonehenge as its undeniable, monumental centerpiece. This concentration of high-status burials radiating out from the monument strongly suggests it was the most prestigious cemetery in the region, perhaps in all of prehistoric Britain for centuries. The evidence isn't just in the surrounding landscape, it's embedded within the monument's very foundation. Excavations have revealed that some of the earliest features at Stonehenge, the Aubrey holes that circle the inside of the bank, contained cremated human remains. Radiocarbon dating tells us these cremations began around 3,000 years before the Common Era, right at the dawn of Stonehenge's story, and continued for at least 500 years. This was not a public cemetery for the common person. The number of individuals found, estimated to be around 150, is relatively small for such a long period of use. This points to a selective process, a place reserved for a privileged elite, a select group of men, women, and even children who are deemed important enough to be buried within this hallowed ground. It transforms our understanding from a simple ceremonial site to a dynastic crypt, where the power of a ruling family was physically rooted in the land, connecting their lineage directly to this immense and enduring symbol. Perhaps the most compelling individual story that brings this theory to life is that of the Amesbury archer. Discovered just a few miles from Stonehenge in a burial that dates to around 2,300 years before the Common Era, the archer's grave was a spectacular find. He was not buried within the stone circle, but his lavish grave goods suggest he was a person of immense importance, possibly directly involved with the site. He was buried with an incredible array of artifacts, beaker pots, gold hair ornaments, copper knives, and most tellingly, a set of stone wrist guards that would have protected an archer's arm from the snap of the bowstring. This was the richest burial of its age ever found in Britain, but the real revelation came from analyzing the archer's teeth. Strontium isotope analysis revealed that he did not grow up on the Salisbury Plain. He originated from what is now the Alpine region of Central Europe. This man had traveled a vast distance to eventually be buried with honor near Stonehenge. His companion, buried nearby and known as the Archer's Companion, was a relative who had grown up locally. This paints a vivid picture, a skilled, high-status individual, perhaps a metalworker or a warrior priest, journeying to this already significant location, bringing new knowledge or authority with him. His presence suggests that Stonehenge was a magnet for the powerful and influential, a place where emerging elites wanted to be associated both in life and in death. Burying their most prominent members here was a way to legitimize their power, linking their bloodline to the spiritual and political authority that Stonehenge represented. In this light, the monument becomes a stone proclamation of power, a permanent and unchallengeable statement that a specific dynasty, a single family, had the divine right to rule this land, with their ancestors watching over them for eternity. While the burial theory grounds Stonehenge in the earthly realm of power and lineage, another interpretation lifts our gaze back to the heavens, not as astronomers but as worshippers. This theory posits that Stonehenge was, at its heart, a colossal temple dedicated to the most powerful deity known to Neolithic people, the sun. For a society entirely dependent on the land, the sun was not just a celestial body, it was the ultimate life-giver, a god whose favor meant the difference between abundance and starvation, between life and death. Its daily journey and, more importantly, its annual cycle governed everything. The precise solar alignments we see at Stonehenge, therefore, were likely far more than a calendar. They were a direct line of communication with the divine, a way to build a house for a god and perform rituals to ensure its continued benevolence. Imagine the scene on the summer solstice, the longest day of the year. As the first hints of light began to glow on the northeastern horizon, hundreds, perhaps thousands of people would have gathered on the plain. After a long, cold night, the air would be charged with anticipation. The community's spiritual leaders, clad in ceremonial robes, would take their place at the very center of the circle, standing before the altar stone. All eyes would be fixed on the slaughter stone and the heel stone in the distance. Then, as the sun's first brilliant edge broke over the horizon, a miraculous event would unfold. A single, powerful beam of light would shoot directly through the entrance, striking the central altar with dramatic precision. For those witnessing this spectacle, it would have been an undeniable miracle, the god of the sun physically entering his temple, his power made manifest in a blaze of light that validated the authority of the priests and reaffirmed the cosmic order. This was not just a marking of a date, it was a communal renewal of a sacred covenant, a celebration of the sun's power at its peak. But the relationship with this deity was not one of constant celebration. The winter solstice was the other side of the coin, a time of deep uncertainty and fear. As the days grew shorter and the sun climbed lower in the sky, people would have watched with growing dread. Was their god weakening? Was he abandoning them? The solstice marked the pivotal moment when the sun's decline would halt. The ceremony here would have had a completely different tone, one of supplication and desperate pleading. The alignment of the monument is such that on the winter solstice, the setting sun would have framed itself perfectly within the great central trilithon, appearing to sink into the very heart of the stone circle. This could have been interpreted as the sun dying and being reborn within the temple itself. Rituals performed at this time would have been designed to encourage the sun's return, to give it strength for its journey back. Chants, offerings, and fires lit against the deepening darkness would have been acts of collective faith, a desperate attempt to influence the cosmos and ensure that light and warmth would once again prevail. In this view, Stonehenge becomes a powerful engine of faith, a place where humanity actively participated in the cosmic drama, striving to maintain the delicate balance of their world through reverence and ritual. This next theory asks us to consider a Britain that was far from unified, a land of scattered, isolated tribes who may have viewed each other with suspicion or even hostility. In such a fragmented world, the construction of Stonehenge becomes not just an architectural miracle, but a profound social and political act. This idea suggests that the monument was a colossal peace project, a deliberate endeavor designed to forge a shared identity among warring groups by giving them a common, sacred goal that transcended their local differences. The sheer scale of the work is the most compelling argument for this. We are not talking about a small family project. This was an enterprise that required the coordinated labor of thousands of people over many generations. To quarry the massive sarsen stones in West Woods, drag them 20 miles to Salisbury Plain, and then erect them with such precision would have demanded an immense workforce with specialized skills in engineering, logistics, and organization. Such a workforce could not have been drawn from a single, small tribe. It required a coalition, a coming together of people from across the region who agreed for a time to put aside their conflicts and work toward a shared vision. The very materials used in Stonehenge's construction can be seen as a powerful symbol of this unification. The monument is not built from a single type of stone. The giant outer circle is made of local sarsens, a hard sandstone from the Marlborough Downs, but the inner circle, the bluestones, have a dramatically different origin, hailing from the Preseli Hills in Wales, over 150 miles away. Why go to such extraordinary lengths to incorporate stones from such a distant land? One interpretation is that these blue stones were not just valued for their supposed healing properties, but also for what they represented. By bringing stones from the territory of one group and combining them with stones from the territory of another, the builders were creating a permanent physical metaphor for a new combined society. The circle itself, a shape with no beginning and no end, could have symbolized the equality and unity of the participating tribes, each one contributing a vital part to the whole. This was no longer a monument belonging to one chieftain. It was a monument belonging to everyone who had a hand in its creation, a neutral, sacred space that stood above petty tribal squabbles. The process of building together would have been as important as the finished product. Imagine the scene for a moment. For weeks or months at a time, people from different communities would have camped together on the plain. They would have shared techniques for moving the colossal stones, solved complex engineering problems as a team, and celebrated small victories together. Through this shared Herculean effort, a new collective identity would have been born. The people of the Stonehenge plain would have emerged distinct from the individual tribes they came from. This shared identity, cemented by sweat and common purpose, would have created powerful social and economic bonds. Inter-tribal marriages would have become more common, trade routes would have been established and secured, and disputes that might have once been settled with violence could now be negotiated at this neutral, revered ground. In this light, Stonehenge becomes a testament to the human capacity for diplomacy and cooperation on a grand scale. It stands as a 5,000-year-old reminder that our ancestors understood the power of a common project to bridge divides and build something far greater than themselves. But if Stonehenge as a solar temple was a feast for the eyes, our next theory proposes it was also a symphony for the ears, transforming our understanding from a silent, stoic circle into a vibrant, resonant instrument. This idea centers on a remarkable physical property of the very stones themselves. Many of the smaller blue stones, when struck with a small hammerstone, do not produce a dull thud. Instead, they ring out with a clear, metallic, bell-like tone that can carry for a considerable distance. These aren't just rocks, they are a type of lithophone, a natural musical instrument forged by geology. This acoustic phenomenon wasn't widely recognized by modern science until researchers, almost by accident, started tapping on the stones and were astonished by the result. The specific type of spotted dolerite that makes up many of the Welsh bluestones has a unique crystalline structure that allows it to vibrate in this way, producing a sound that is both haunting and beautiful. It raises a compelling question. Did the Neolithic builders specifically seek out these stones not just for how they looked, but for how they sounded? This discovery opens up a completely different sensory dimension to the rituals that might have taken place here. Imagine a ceremony under the light of a full moon. The vast, dark plain is silent but for the wind. Then, a ritual specialist, perhaps a shaman, begins to strike the blue stones in a specific sequence. Each impact produces a deep, gong-like ring that echoes across the landscape. The sounds would have interacted with the circle's architecture, the large sarsen stones acting as both reflectors and resonators, creating a complex soundscape that would have been utterly immersive for anyone standing within the circle. This wouldn't be mere music for entertainment, it would have been a powerful tool for altering consciousness. The repetitive, resonant frequencies, combined with the darkness and the rhythmic chanting or dancing that likely accompanied it, could have easily induced trance-like states in the participants. In such a state, the boundaries between the physical world and the spirit world would blur, allowing the shamans to communicate with ancestors or deities, and the community to experience a collective spiritual awakening. The stones, in this view, become a technological interface for accessing the divine. The selection and transportation of the blue stones from Wales takes on an even greater significance through this lens. The immense effort required to move them 150 miles becomes a testament to the value placed on their sonic properties. It suggests that their sound was not a curious side effect, but a primary reason for their inclusion. This theory challenges the primacy of the visual alignment that dominates so many other interpretations. Perhaps the true magic of Stonehenge wasn't just in seeing the sun align with the heel stone, but in hearing the stones sing as the sun rose, creating a multi-sensory ritual experience that was designed to overwhelm the rational mind and connect people directly to the sacred. The monument ceases to be a static calendar and becomes a dynamic, interactive device, its power activated not by sight alone but by sound, a 5,000-year-old concert hall whose performances were dedicated to the gods. Now we arrive at one of the most popular and sensational theories, the idea that has captured the public imagination like no other. This is the notion that Stonehenge was not built by human hands at all, but served as an alien landing pad or perhaps an interstellar communication device for visitors from another world. This theory really exploded into the mainstream with the 1968 publication of Erich von Däniken's book, Chariots of the Gods, which proposed that ancient monuments around the globe were evidence of extraterrestrial contact. The core argument is seductively simple. Primitive humans with their simple stone tools could not possibly have engineered something so monumental and precise. Therefore, the logic goes, the only explanation is that they had help from a technologically advanced alien civilization. Proponents of this idea often point to the sheer scale of the stones and the accuracy of their celestial alignments as proof. They also highlight the site's prominent location on Salisbury Plain, suggesting its layout is meant to be seen from the air, almost like a beacon or a signal to passing spacecraft. While it's a thrilling concept fit for a science fiction blockbuster, archaeologists and historians have spent decades systematically dismantling its foundations, not to dismiss our ancestors but to celebrate their true genius. The belief that moving multi-ton stones was impossible for Neolithic people is based on a profound underestimation of human ingenuity, cooperation, and sheer determination. Experiments have repeatedly shown that the task, while monumental, was entirely achievable with the technology of the time. Using nothing more than wooden sledges, ropes made from plant fibers, and a system of wooden rollers, teams of volunteers have successfully transported and erected stones of similar weight. The process involves leverage, coordination, and a deep understanding of physics, but it doesn't require anti-gravity beams or laser cutters. It requires organized labor and time. As for the celestial alignments, this doesn't point to alien knowledge but to generations of meticulous observation. Ancient people spent their lives under night skies unpolluted by artificial light. They knew the movements of the stars and planets with an intimacy we have largely lost. Their achievement was not in receiving advanced information, but in their patient cumulative study of the heavens. Ultimately, to attribute Stonehenge to aliens is to rob our ancestors of their greatest accomplishment. It diminishes the incredible story of a society that achieved the seemingly impossible through collective will, innovative engineering, and a deep spiritual connection to their world. The real mystery of Stonehenge is not how space travelers built it, but how human beings with no written language or metal tools managed to coordinate a project that spanned generations, creating a legacy that has endured for 5,000 years. That human story is far more fascinating and inspiring than any fictional tale of extraterrestrial intervention. Shifting our focus from the skies and sounds to the very ground beneath our feet, we come to a theory that taps into a more subtle, invisible force. This idea proposes that Stonehenge is not merely a structure on the landscape, but a sophisticated machine integrated with it, a kind of Neolithic power plant designed to harness the Earth's own energy. Proponents of this view suggest that the monument sits at the intersection of powerful ley lines, which are imagined as invisible channels of spiritual or electromagnetic energy crisscrossing the globe. According to this theory, the massive sarsen stones, with their unique crystalline structure, act as natural conductors or amplifiers for this energy, creating a concentrated vortex of power within the circle. This wasn't a power source for lighting homes, but rather for spiritual or healing purposes, a place where the Earth's vitality could be accessed and directed by those who knew how. The experience of modern visitors often fuels this belief. Many people report palpable physical sensations when they step inside the circle, a tingling in their hands, a lightheadedness, or a profound sense of peace or unease that they can't easily explain. Practitioners of dowsing, the ancient art of detecting hidden substances or energies using rods or pendulums, often claim that the site is a hotbed of activity. They describe complex patterns of energy swirling around and between the stones, with points of particular intensity at the center or near specific stones like the altar stone. For those who feel it, this energy is not a metaphor. It is a real, physical phenomenon that validates the idea that the builders chose this location for its unique geophysical properties. The arrangement of the stones in this light is seen as a deliberate act of geomancy, a way to tune the landscape like a crystal radio to receive and focus these natural currents. Mainstream science, however, offers a very different explanation for these experiences. The concept of ley lines was popularized in the 1920s by an amateur archaeologist named Alfred Watkins, who theorized that ancient sites were connected by straight tracks. While intriguing, modern archaeology finds no physical evidence for these lines beyond coincidence. Scientists attribute the perception of ley lines to a psychological phenomenon called apophenia, the human tendency to find meaningful patterns in random data. When you have thousands of ancient sites scattered across a landscape, statistically, some will inevitably align. As for the sensations people feel, geologists point out that there are no unusual magnetic or radioactive anomalies at Stonehenge that would account for such physical effects. The feelings of awe, dizziness, or energy are more likely a powerful psychosomatic response to the site's immense age, staggering scale, and profound aura of mystery. Standing inside a 5,000-year-old temple that has witnessed countless human dramas can trigger a deep, emotional response that our minds interpret in physical terms. Yet, even if we dismiss the literal existence of ley lines, this theory speaks to a fundamental truth about Stonehenge. It acknowledges the undeniable sense of place that the monument commands. There is a reason this specific spot on Salisbury Plain was chosen, developed, and revered for millennia. It might not be about invisible energy lines, but about something more tangible, a prominent, elevated position with a commanding view of the horizon, perhaps a pre-existing sacred grove or a meeting point of ancient territories. The power of Stonehenge may not be electromagnetic, but it is very real. It is the power of human genius, of collective effort, and of a location so imbued with history and meaning that it continues to resonate with visitors on a deeply intuitive level, making the idea of it being a great battery for the Earth's spirit a poetic, if not scientific, expression of its enduring mystique. Building on the idea of Stonehenge as an astronomical calculator, some theorists have pushed the boundaries of interpretation even further, proposing that the entire monument is nothing less than a scale model of our solar system. This captivating theory suggests that the arrangement of the stones, the ditches, and the various holes encircling the site were meticulously planned to represent the Sun, the Moon, and the known planets along with their relative orbits. It's a vision of Stonehenge as a grand cosmological map, a three-dimensional blueprint of the universe carved into the chalk downland by people who sought to capture the cosmos in stone. The appeal is undeniable. It transforms the familiar circle into a profound statement about humanity's place in the universe, a Neolithic orrery that predates modern ones by thousands of years. Proponents of this solar system model point to specific features to build their case. They might argue that the central area represents the Sun, with the various rings of stones and pits, the Aubrey holes, the Y and Z holes symbolizing the orbits of celestial bodies. In some interpretations, the specific number of these holes, like the 56 Aubrey holes, is seen as a numerical key, perhaps representing a cycle used to track planetary movements or predict eclipses. The different sizes and types of stones could then correspond to the different planets, with the massive sarsens standing for the gas giants and the smaller blue stones for the rocky inner planets. The theory attempts to find a hidden order, a complex pattern that goes far beyond simple sun and moon alignments, suggesting the builders possessed a sophisticated, holistic understanding of the heavens. However, this theory faces significant, and many would say insurmountable, historical and logistical challenges. The most glaring issue is knowledge. The classical planets visible to the naked eye, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, were known to ancient civilizations like the Greeks and Romans. But the builders of Stonehenge's main phases lived over 2,000 years earlier, in a pre-literate society with no known tradition of recording planetary observations. It is a huge leap to assume they recognized these wandering stars as bodies orbiting our sun, let alone that they understood the solar system as a coherent system with the sun at its center, a concept that wouldn't be accepted in the West until Copernicus in the 16th century. Furthermore, the configurations at Stonehenge simply don't match the proportions of our solar system. The orbits of the planets are not neat, concentric circles, they are ellipses of vastly different scales. To fit Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto into the model, theorists have to extend the map far beyond the monument's boundaries into the surrounding landscape, a move that often feels more like creative interpretation than archaeological evidence. Despite these scientific shortcomings, the solar system theory remains compelling for what it reveals about us. It highlights a deep-seated human desire to find meaning and order in the world, especially in a structure as enigmatic as Stonehenge. We are pattern-seeking creatures, and when faced with a mystery of this magnitude, it is natural to project our own frameworks of understanding onto it. The theory speaks to our enduring fascination with the monument, a reflection of our own wish to see it as the ultimate achievement of ancient knowledge, a place where the secrets of the universe were not just observed but set in stone for eternity. It may tell us less about the Neolithic mind and more about our modern yearning to connect with our ancestors in the most profound way possible, by believing they shared our cosmic curiosity. But beyond the hopes for healing and the reverence for ancestors, there is a theory that confronts a much darker aspect of human nature, suggesting that the stones of Stonehenge may have witnessed acts of ultimate sacrifice. This idea is not born from mere speculation, but from tangible, chilling evidence unearthed from the earth itself. Perhaps the most compelling and grisly find was the discovery of a skeleton that has become known as the Stonehenge Archer. Buried in the ditch surrounding the monument, this man met a violent end around 2,300 years before the Common Era. The cause of death was clear. Several flint arrowheads were found embedded in his bones, and one had pierced his spine. This was not a casual death in battle. The placement of the body and the nature of his wounds have led some archaeologists to propose that this was a ritual killing, a human offering to powers far greater than any chieftain. To understand this possibility, we must look beyond Salisbury Plain to the wider Neolithic world. Across Europe, there is compelling evidence that human sacrifice was a practiced, if rare, element of ancient religion, particularly during periods of extreme duress. One of the most famous examples comes from a peat bog in Denmark known as the Tollund Man. This individual, dating from a slightly later period, was found exquisitely preserved with a rope still tight around his neck. The careful arrangement of his body and the fact that his last meal was a special, perhaps ceremonial, gruel strongly points to a ritual sacrifice, likely to appease a deity for a bountiful harvest or to avert a catastrophe. If such practices were known in Northern Europe, it is not a huge leap to consider that the people who built Stonehenge might have shared similar beliefs, turning to the most extreme form of supplication when faced with existential threats. Imagine a scenario where the society that built Stonehenge was collapsing under the strain of a prolonged famine, a devastating disease, or a catastrophic failure of the seasons. The very astronomical precision they had relied upon would have seemed like a cruel joke if the sun's return did not bring the expected rains or warmth. In such a moment of collective panic and despair, the priests or rulers might have felt that the usual offerings of animals or precious objects were no longer sufficient. The gods, they may have believed, demanded a more potent gift, a human life. A sacrifice conducted within the sacred circle would have been an act of profound communal theater, a desperate attempt to restore cosmic balance by offering the ultimate possession back to the creators. The victim, perhaps a volunteer seeking glory for their family, a captured enemy warrior, or even a high-status individual chosen for the honor, would be killed in a prescribed, ritualistic manner, their blood soaking into the earth as a potent fertilizer to renew the world. This theory forces us to abandon any romanticized notion of a purely peaceful, enlightened Neolithic society. It adds a layer of grim reality to the monument, suggesting that its purpose was not always one of celebration and healing. Stonehenge, in this light, becomes a place of stark duality. It could be a site of hope and renewal during the summer solstice, but also a place of fear and brutal pragmatism during a crisis. The same stones that framed the life-giving sun could have also been the backdrop for a practice we find abhorrent today, a sobering reminder that the drive to survive and appease the unknown can lead humanity to dark and desperate acts. This potential for darkness makes the achievement of Stonehenge even more complex and human. It was not built by angels, but by people capable of both sublime artistry and terrible sacrifice. This theory takes the idea of Stonehenge as an astronomical computer and elevates it to an even more sophisticated level of celestial prediction. Beyond simply marking the steady, predictable rhythm of the seasons, some researchers argue that the monument's architects devised a way to forecast one of the most awe-inspiring and frightening events in the ancient sky, a total lunar eclipse. The key to this complex puzzle lies not with the massive standing stones, but with a circle of 56 mysterious pits dug into the chalk just inside the monument's outer bank, known as the Aubrey Holes. These seemingly simple depressions, named after the 17th century antiquarian John Aubrey, who first identified them, may have served as the counting beads on a gigantic Stone Age abacus. The mathematics behind this idea, while complex in its implications, is elegantly simple in its execution. It revolves around tracking two crucial lunar cycles. The first is the synodic month, the 29.5 days it takes for the moon to go from full to new and back to full again. The second, far more critical for predicting eclipses, is the Saros cycle. This is a period of approximately 18 years and 11 days, after which the Sun, Earth, and Moon return to nearly the same relative geometry, and a similar eclipse will occur. The genius of the proposed system is that 56 is a number that beautifully interacts with these cycles. It is almost exactly 3 Saros cycles. Furthermore, if you imagine using two markers, one representing the Sun and one the Moon, and moving them around the circle of 56 holes at different rates, you could theoretically track when these celestial bodies would align in such a way that the Earth's shadow would fall across the Moon. Imagine the process in action. A priestly class, the keepers of this knowledge, would be responsible for moving these markers after every full moon. The community would see this as a kind of magical ritual, but it was actually a rigorous application of long-term observational data. The system wouldn't be perfect, but it would provide a reliable warning that an eclipse was probable within a certain window of time. For a society that lived in a world governed by divine forces, a lunar eclipse was not a predictable astronomical event. It was a moment of cosmic crisis. The moon, often a deity in its own right, would slowly turn a deep, ominous blood red, seemingly dying in the sky. This would have been interpreted as a terrible omen, a sign of divine displeasure, or an attack by dark spirits. The ability to predict such an event would have been a source of unimaginable power. The priest who could stand before the people and announce, "In 10 nights the moon will be consumed by the sky serpent, but fear not, for we will perform the rituals to ensure its return," would have been seen as possessing a direct line to the gods. This knowledge would have cemented their authority, transforming them from mere ceremonial leaders into essential intermediaries who could protect the community from celestial chaos. The predicted eclipse would then become a managed event. Instead of a surprise that sparked panic, it would be a scheduled performance of religious power. The people would gather, and as the eclipse began, the priests would conduct loud, frantic ceremonies, beating drums, lighting fires, chanting spells, seemingly battling the dark forces and ultimately triumphing as the moon slowly returned to its full brightness. This carefully staged drama would prove their power to the populace again and again. The Aubrey holes, therefore, were not just pits in the ground, they were the central processing unit of a theocratic state, a tool that turned terrifying celestial chaos into a scripted demonstration of priestly control, ensuring social order through the mastery of time itself. Long before archaeologists with their carbon dating and laser theodolites arrived on Salisbury Plain, the local people had their own explanations for the mysterious stone circle, and these stories are every bit as fascinating as our modern scientific theories. For generations, the common folk of Britain looked upon the colossal stones and concluded that they were simply too grand, too heavy to be the work of ordinary men. The most pervasive and enduring legend was that Stonehenge was built by a race of giants, beings of immense stature and strength from a bygone age who could toss these multi-ton rocks into place as if they were children's building blocks. This idea tapped into a deep-seated human tendency. When faced with a feat that seems superhuman, we attribute it to superhuman creators. It was a way to make sense of the impossible, to populate the landscape with a mythology that gave meaning to its most awe-inspiring features. Perhaps the most colorful and detailed of these pre-scientific explanations comes to us from the rich tapestry of Arthurian legend, woven by the 12th century cleric Geoffrey of Monmouth in his History of the Kings of Britain. In his account, the monument is not the work of giants, but of the great wizard Merlin himself. The story goes that after a treacherous massacre of British nobles by Saxons, the mighty King Aurelius Ambrosius wished to erect a fitting memorial to the fallen. Merlin advised that the most majestic monument possible could be constructed using a magical circle of stones known as the Giant's Dance, which stood on a mountain in Ireland. He claimed these stones possessed healing properties and had been brought from Africa by giants in ancient times. When an expedition of British knights found the Irish circle, they were unable to move the massive stones. Merlin, using his immense magical skill and clever machinery, effortlessly disassembled the stones and had them transported across the sea to Salisbury Plain, where they were re-erected exactly as they had been. This legend brilliantly merges the giant folklore with a new, charismatic figure, transforming Stonehenge into a monument of national myth, forever linking it to the epic story of King Arthur. These ancient tales are far more than simple fairy tales. They represent the essential first layer of human engagement with the monument. They were the theories of their day, born from a combination of awe, local knowledge, and a complete absence of the scientific method. Without the tools to understand quarrying techniques or organized labor, the only logical conclusion for a medieval farmer was that the stones had been assembled by magic or by beings of unimaginable power. These myths served a crucial purpose. They preserved the importance of the site through storytelling, ensuring that each generation understood that this was a place of profound significance, even if its original purpose had been lost to time. The stories embedded Stonehenge into the cultural identity of Britain long before it became an archaeological site. As the Age of Enlightenment dawned in the 17th and 18th centuries, these mystical explanations began to give way to new, albeit still speculative, ideas. Scholars started to look beyond the confines of Europe for answers, turning to the classical world they were rediscovering. One prominent theory suggested that Stonehenge was not a British creation at all, but a temple built by the Romans during their occupation of the island. This seemed plausible to antiquarians who saw the Romans as the only ancient civilization sophisticated enough for such an engineering marvel. Others looked further afield, proposing that it was the work of the Danes, perhaps a coronation site for their kings, or even the Phoenicians, a seafaring people known to have traded for British tin. Each of these theories reflected the biases and knowledge of the time, always attributing the construction to a civilized foreign power, as the idea of prehistoric native Britons achieving such a feat was still unthinkable to many. The pivotal moment arrived in the mid-17th century with the work of John Aubrey, who first conducted a serious survey of the site. While he mistakenly attributed it to the Celtic Druids, a belief that persists in popular culture to this day, his approach was revolutionary. He moved away from pure legend and relied on direct observation and measurement, laying the groundwork for modern archaeology. The real paradigm shift, however, came in the early 20th century with the pioneering excavations of William Hawley and later Richard Atkinson. Through meticulous stratigraphic digging and eventually radiocarbon dating, they were able to push the timeline of Stonehenge's construction back by thousands of years, firmly into the Neolithic and Bronze Ages, a period that predated the Romans, the Celts, and even the Druids by millennia. This was the final, definitive proof that the true builders were the indigenous people of prehistoric Britain. The journey from giants and wizards to archaeologists and dating techniques is a profound story in itself. It demonstrates a fundamental shift in how humanity seeks answers, from imaginative myth-making to empirical inquiry. Yet, in a way, the old legends and the new science are both driven by the same powerful force, an insatiable curiosity about our past. The prehistoric Britons who raised the stones, the medieval storytellers who created Merlin's myth, and the modern scientists who analyze antler picks and post holes are all connected across time by their shared wonder at this incredible circle. The giants may have been banished from our textbooks, but their shadow still falls across the plain, a reminder that the mystery of Stonehenge is powerful enough to create entire worlds of imagination. While the theories of celestial observation and sacred ritual paint a picture of Stonehenge as a place apart, we must also consider a far more grounded yet equally transformative possibility. What if the monument's true power lay not just in its spiritual function, but in its role as the economic engine of its age? This theory reimagines the windswept plain not as a secluded temple, but as the bustling heart of Neolithic Britain, a colossal trade and festival center that pulsed with life and commerce. The geographical location itself provides the first major clue. Salisbury Plain is not an isolated spot. It sits at a natural confluence of ancient trackways, pathways that had been worn into the landscape over centuries by the movement of people and animals. Long before the first stone was raised, this was likely a natural meeting point, a neutral ground where different groups could safely converge. The decision to build such a monumental complex here would have solidified that status, turning a casual crossroads into a formal and permanent destination. The sheer scale of the construction project provides the strongest argument for a vibrant economy. We often focus on the stones, but we should also think about the people. Feeding, housing, and organizing a workforce numbering in the thousands over multiple generations would have required a logistical miracle. This wasn't just a local project, it was a stimulus package for the entire region. Think of the supply chains that would have been necessary. There would have been a constant demand for food. Herds of cattle and pigs would have been driven from miles around. Skilled craftspeople were essential. Toolmakers producing antler picks and stone mauls, rope makers twisting plant fibers into cables strong enough to haul 25-ton stones, and carpenters building the complex sledges and rollers. This created a specialized economy where individuals or even entire communities could thrive by providing a specific good or service to the project. The need for resources would have forced interaction and trade between previously isolated groups, establishing networks that would endure long after the last stone was set in place. But the economic activity would have peaked during the great annual gatherings, likely timed to coincide with the solstices. The religious ceremony marking the sun's turning point would have been the main event, the spiritual draw that guaranteed a massive turnout. But surrounding that central ritual would have been a sprawling, vibrant fair. Imagine the scene, hundreds of temporary shelters dotting the landscape, the air filled with the smoke of campfires and the sounds of different languages and barter. People from the chalk downs of the south would bring their finely worked flint tools to trade for distinctive pottery from the north. A community from the coast might offer dried fish and precious seashells in exchange for a prized axe head made from the volcanic rock of the Lake District. This was more than just a swap meet. It was a Neolithic stock exchange and social network rolled into one. Beyond the exchange of goods, these gatherings served a deeper social purpose. In a world of small, scattered tribes, finding a marriage partner outside one's immediate family was crucial for genetic diversity and building alliances. Stonehenge would have been the perfect place for arranged marriages, where chieftains could negotiate unions that would cement political bonds and secure peace. It was also a massive information hub. This is where news traveled, where technological innovations were shared. A new technique for polishing stone, a more effective way to till soil, or a story about a hunting ground discovered beyond the mountains. All this knowledge would diffuse through the population at this central point. The rituals united people spiritually, but the fair united them economically and socially, weaving a tapestry of interconnectedness across the British landscape. In this light, Stonehenge becomes more than a temple. It becomes a catalyst for civilization. The cooperative effort of building it fostered a shared identity, while the recurring gatherings maintained the economic and social ties that held that identity together. It transformed a collection of isolated villages into a coherent cultural sphere. The stones, therefore, are not just a monument to faith or astronomical genius, but a testament to the birth of a networked society, proving that even 5,000 years ago, commerce and community were powerful forces capable of moving mountains, or in this case, massive stones. After exploring the bustling economic fairs and the practical exchange of goods, we now turn our attention to a theory that posits Stonehenge was designed for a journey of an entirely different kind, not across the land but between worlds. This idea suggests that the monument's true purpose was to serve as a doorway to the underworld or perhaps even another dimension, a place where the boundaries of reality were deliberately thinned. The very architecture of the site fuels this interpretation. The iconic trilithons, those massive three-stone structures of two verticals capped by a horizontal lintel, are far more than just a feat of engineering stability. To the human psyche, they instinctively frame a space. They create a threshold. In cultures across the globe and throughout history, such thresholds, whether the doorways of a temple, a gate in a city wall, or a natural arch, have been seen as liminal zones, places of transition that are neither here nor there and are therefore sacred. At Stonehenge, these stone doorways are arranged in a circle, suggesting not just one portal, but a ring of them, a battery of gateways concentrated in a single, powerful location. For the Neolithic mind, this would not have been a mere abstract concept. This was a tangible reality. The cycle of life, death, and the seasons. The sun dying each winter and being reborn each summer would have reinforced the belief in an unseen world that paralleled their own, a realm of ancestors and spirits that directly influenced their lives. The monument's precise alignment with the solstices takes on a deeper meaning here. The rising sun on the summer solstice didn't just mark a date. It was a moment when the veil between worlds was at its thinnest, when the life-giving power of the sun deity could flood directly into our world through the framed entrance of the circle. In this view, the priests or shamans were not just astronomers. They were interdimensional travelers, skilled psychonauts who knew how to navigate these spiritual gateways. They would have used a combination of techniques to alter their consciousness: rhythmic drumming, perhaps facilitated by the ringing bluestones, chanting, fasting, or hallucinogenic plants to achieve a trance state. In this state, they would step through the trilithon portals, not physically but in spirit, to seek wisdom from ancestors, bargain with deities for good harvests, or retrieve knowledge from the other side. This ancient shamanic interpretation finds a surprising resonance in some modern metaphysical beliefs. Today, many visitors and modern spiritual seekers describe Stonehenge as a powerful, thin place, a term borrowed from Celtic tradition denoting locations where the barrier between the ordinary world and the divine or spiritual world is permeable. People report feelings of heightened awareness, vivid visual phenomena, and a profound sense of connection to something greater than themselves. While science attributes these experiences to the psychological power of suggestion and the awe-inspiring nature of the site, the consistency of these reports is striking. It suggests that the monument's design, its age, and its accumulated history of human emotion create an environment that powerfully impacts the human mind, encouraging a sense of the transcendental. Whether one views this as a genuine metaphysical phenomenon or a profound psychological effect, the outcome is similar. Stonehenge functions as a catalyst for experiences that feel like contact with another realm. The theory ultimately challenges our very definition of practical function. If we only consider functions like marking time or hosting fairs as practical, we miss a deeper layer of human need. For a society living at the mercy of nature, the most practical thing in the world might be to have a direct hotline to the gods who control the weather, the crops, and their very fate. Ensuring a successful hunt, healing a sick child, or understanding the meaning of a drought, these were urgent, life and death concerns. A portal to the spirit world was the ultimate tool for addressing them. It transformed Stonehenge from a passive calendar into an active instrument of divine interaction. The stillness we perceive in the stones today belies the intense, dynamic spiritual activity they were built to host, a place where, for generations, humanity reached through the stone doorways, striving to touch the face of the unknown and bring back answers to the most enduring questions of existence. Following this thread of Stonehenge as a symbolic center, another interpretation offers a compellingly literal map of the very ground beneath the builder's feet. This theory proposes that the monument was not merely a place within the landscape, but a deliberate, scaled-down representation of the landscape itself. Imagine standing at the center of the circle and looking out. The arrangement of stones around you, according to this idea, would correspond to the sacred hills, river sources, and ancestral territories of the entire British world as they knew it. In this view, Stonehenge becomes a massive, three-dimensional map carved from the bones of the earth, a statement of territorial identity and a cosmological claim that this spot was the very heart of their universe. The strongest evidence for this lies in the diverse origins of the stones themselves. The monument is built from two primary rock types that come from dramatically different locations. The giant sarsen stones that form the iconic outer circle and trilithons were dragged from the West Woods, about 20 miles to the north. These massive, locally sourced stones could represent the nearby, familiar territories of the Salisbury Plain and its immediate surroundings, the homeland of the people who orchestrated the construction. In stark contrast, the smaller, distinctive bluestones were brought an astonishing 150 miles from the Preseli Hills in southwest Wales. Why undertake such a monumental journey for these specific stones? A geographical interpretation suggests that the bluestones are not just rocks. They are symbolic stand-ins for that distant, spiritually significant land. By physically incorporating stones from Wales into the circle, the builders were effectively bringing that far-off territory into their own, creating a microcosm where the entire known world was gathered into a single, manageable space. This concept of a symbolic center is powerfully encapsulated by the Greek term omphalos, meaning the navel of the world, Many ancient cultures identified a specific location as the cosmic center from which creation unfolded, a point of connection between the earthly and divine realms. For the Neolithic Britons, the center of Stonehenge, perhaps marked by the altar stone or the empty space within the circle, could have served this exact purpose. It was the axis mundi, the stable pivot around which their entire universe revolved. From this central point, the world was organized and made comprehensible. The stones acted as markers not just for celestial bodies but for territorial boundaries, ancestral burial mounds, and sacred sites scattered across the island. This transformed the monument into more than a temple. It was a political and spiritual Chinese letter. It was a permanent declaration that the people who built it did not just live on the land, they understood it, controlled it, and had mapped its very essence into a sacred, eternal form. The circle was a claim of ownership written in a language of stone that would endure for millennia, a declaration that their power and identity were woven into the geography of Britain itself. Building on the idea of Stonehenge as a cosmic map, our next theory shifts the narrative from a tool for observing the future to a memorial for an unforgettable past. Imagine that the motivation for building this colossal structure was not to track the steady cycles of the sun and moon, but to commemorate a single, terrifying, or magnificent event that was seared into the collective memory of a culture. This perspective frames Stonehenge not as a calculator, but as a permanent stone memory, a cenotaph erected to mark a moment that fundamentally altered the worldview of its builders. One of the most dramatic proposals within this category points to a celestial catastrophe. Some researchers have suggested a link to a hypothesized cometary impact event that occurred around 12,800 years ago, an event that some scientists believe triggered a mini ice age known as the Younger Dryas period. The theory speculates that a fragmented comet slammed into the Earth's atmosphere, with one proposed impact zone being the northeastern United States, creating the thousands of elliptical depressions known as the Carolina Bays. While the science behind a global cataclysm is still heavily debated, the core idea is captivating. What if the ancestors of the Stonehenge builders witnessed a similarly apocalyptic event in the sky? The memory of the night sky exploding with fire, of a brilliant, terrifying light show followed by decades of climatic chaos, could have been passed down through oral tradition for thousands of years. The construction of Stonehenge, then, might have been an attempt to create a permanent marker for this epoch-defining event, a way to physically ground a story of world-altering change and perhaps to appease the celestial forces that caused it. Alternatively, the event could have been wondrous rather than destructive. Perhaps it was a spectacularly bright supernova, a star exploding with such brilliance that it was visible even during the day for weeks, outshining every other object in the night sky. Or it could have been an exceptionally rare and perfect conjunction of planets, where Venus, Mars, and Jupiter appeared to merge into a single, dazzling point of light. In a world without light pollution, such an event would have been utterly profound. It would not have been seen as a simple astronomical occurrence, but as a direct message from the gods, a divine sign that demanded interpretation and, crucially, remembrance. The alignment of the stones in this scenario might not be for predicting a future solstice, but for permanently capturing the exact spot on the horizon where this miraculous sign first appeared. The monument becomes a snapshot of the heavens at a specific, sacred moment in time. This theory challenges the gradualist view of prehistoric life. We often think of our ancestors as living in a slow, unchanging world, but their skies were dynamic and unpredictable. A single, unprecedented celestial spectacle could have shattered their understanding of a stable cosmos and prompted a radical response. Building Stonehenge would have been a way to regain a sense of control, to literally set the event in stone and integrate it into their mythology. It transforms the purpose of the monument from an active, recurring tool to a passive, one-time memorial. It stands not as a computer, but as a history book written in monoliths, ensuring that no future generation would forget the day the gods made their presence known in the most dramatic way imaginable. While most theories focus on the heavens or human rituals, this next idea grounds the purpose of Stonehenge firmly in the earth itself, suggesting the builders were not just astronomers but also pioneering geologists. This theory proposes that the stone circle was an ingenious seismic predictor, an early warning system designed to detect the rumblings of distant earthquakes. The concept hinges on the physical properties of the monument's construction. Each of the massive sarsen stones was carefully shaped and set deep into the chalk bedrock of Salisbury Plain. This direct, rigid connection between the multi-ton monolith and the earth could have turned each upright into a highly sensitive vibration sensor, a kind of Neolithic seismometer. The slightest tremor traveling through the ground would be transmitted up the stone, causing it to vibrate in a way that might have been detectable to a trained observer. The system's sophistication, according to this view, would have been in its directional specificity. The theory speculates that smaller, carefully placed warning stones could have been balanced on the ground near the base of these primary uprights. If a tremor arrived from a particular direction, say, from the seismically active zones of Wales, the very source of the bluestones, the resulting vibrations through the primary stone might be amplified in a way that would cause these smaller, precariously balanced stones to topple over. By observing which warning stones fell, the community's guardians could not only know that a quake had occurred but also pinpoint the general direction of the epicenter. This would have provided invaluable, potentially life-saving advance notice. Even a few hours of warning could allow people to move from unstable shelters, secure belongings, or prepare for potential tsunamis if the quake was coastal, turning a sudden disaster into a managed event. It's a highly speculative idea, but it speaks to a potential deep understanding of the land that is often overlooked. The builders chose Salisbury Plain for a reason, and their familiarity with its geology was profound. They knew how to work the chalk, how to set stones securely, and they would have been intimately aware of the natural phenomena of their world, including earth tremors. While we have no direct archaeological evidence like inscriptions explaining such a system, the absence of written records from the time means we cannot discount practical, survival-based knowledge being encoded into the monument's design. This theory reframes Stonehenge not as a temple to distant gods, but as a practical tool for community safety, a testament to a society that learned to read the subtle language of the planet they lived on, using the bones of the earth to protect themselves from its occasional fury. But beyond its spiritual and economic roles, we must confront a possibility that speaks to the very nature of human societies, the raw, unvarnished exercise of power. This theory posits that Stonehenge was, at its core, a monumental piece of political theater, the ultimate symbol of dominion erected by a newly formed and ambitious elite. The sheer, undeniable scale of the project is the most compelling argument for this. To marshal the labor required to drag 80-ton stones across 20 miles of countryside, to feed and house the workforce for generations, and to execute a plan of such staggering complexity speaks to a level of social organization that goes far beyond voluntary cooperation. This was not a community project in the casual sense. It was a command economy on a massive scale, requiring a powerful, centralized authority with the ability to coerce, organize, and direct the lives of thousands. The monument itself, therefore, is physical proof of that authority, a permanent statement that could not be ignored or easily overthrown. The location of Stonehenge was a deliberate act of political genius. Positioned on a high, open plain, it was visible for miles in every direction. For any approaching group, whether friendly traders or potential rivals, the sight of those towering stones on the horizon would have been an unforgettable and intimidating demonstration of power long before they reached the site. It was a message written across the landscape: the people who built this can achieve the impossible. They command forces you cannot comprehend. This was architecture as dominance, designed to instill a sense of awe and submission in the local population and to deter challenges from neighboring groups. The ability to create such a symbol was in itself a form of soft power that reinforced the ruling class's right to lead, suggesting they had a special connection to the gods or possessed knowledge that set them apart. Perhaps the most revealing political clue lies in the exotic nature of the bluestones. The immense effort expended to bring these specific stones from the Preseli Hills in Wales, over 150 miles away, may have been more than a spiritual quest. It could have been a calculated display of geopolitical reach. By incorporating materials from such a distant and culturally distinct land, the ruling elite were making a profound statement about their influence. It was as if they were saying, "Our power extends far beyond the boundaries of our immediate territory. We can command resources from lands you have never seen, and our influence stretches to the very edges of your world." This transformed the bluestones from simple ritual objects into trophies, tangible evidence of long-distance alliances, trade networks, or even military conquest. Their presence in the circle was a constant, visible reminder of the expansive and unassailable power of the ruling dynasty. In this light, the solstice ceremonies take on a new dimension. While they were undoubtedly spiritual events, they also functioned as massive state-sponsored rallies. The gatherings of thousands of people from across the region provided the perfect platform for the elite to reinforce their authority. The priests, who were likely also the political leaders, would have performed their rituals from the center of the circle, literally positioning themselves as the intermediaries through which the sun's life-giving power was channeled to the people. Their ability to predict the solstice and stage the dramatic alignment of the sun's rays would have been presented not as shared knowledge, but as a unique divine gift granted to them. This carefully orchestrated spectacle legitimized their rule, linking their political power directly to the cosmic order. The message was clear: challenge us and you challenge the gods themselves. The stones, therefore, were not just a temple, but the throne room of a theocratic state, a permanent engine of propaganda designed to ensure that the power concentrated in the hands of a few would remain unchallenged for generations to come. This concept of honoring the dead takes us to a theory that views Stonehenge not just as a cemetery, but as a dynamic bridge between the living and those who had passed on. This perspective suggests the monument was a central site for ancestor veneration, a place where the community could actively maintain a relationship with their forebears, seeking their guidance and ensuring their favor. The evidence of burials we discussed earlier transforms here from a simple fact of interment into the foundation of a living spiritual practice. The presence of ancestral remains within the circle itself implies that the dead were not sealed away and forgotten. They were brought into the very heart of the community's most important rituals. The living and the dead were thought to coexist within this sacred space, with the stone circle serving as a permanent, powerful conduit for communication between the two realms. The precise solar alignments of Stonehenge take on a profoundly different meaning through this lens. The annual cycle of the sun, with its death at the winter solstice and glorious rebirth at the summer solstice, would have provided a perfect, hopeful metaphor for the journey of the human soul. Just as the sun weakened and seemed to vanish, only to be reborn stronger each year, so too might the soul be perceived as undergoing a transformation, not a final ending. The ceremonies held at the solstices, therefore, were likely not just about marking time for agricultural purposes. They could have been massive communal events focused on the ancestors. The rising sun on the summer solstice, bursting through the entrance and striking the altar stone, might have been seen as a moment when the veil between worlds was thinnest, a time when the spirits of the ancestors could most easily return to the world of the living to receive offerings and hear the petitions of their descendants. This practice of ancestor veneration would have been crucial for social cohesion and identity. In a world without written histories, the collective memory of the lineage was everything. By gathering at a place where their literal ancestors were buried, the community could physically touch their own history. The stories of great chieftains, skilled healers, and brave warriors would be told and retold, their deeds immortalized by the towering stones under which they rested. This created a powerful sense of continuity and belonging. An individual wasn't just a solitary person. They were a link in a chain that stretched back through generations, a chain that was anchored right here on this plane. To honor your ancestors was to affirm your own place in the world and to ensure the lineage would continue into the future. The act of bringing gifts, food, finely crafted tools, or precious ornaments to leave at the base of the stones or in the burial pits was a tangible investment in that relationship. It was a way of showing respect and, importantly, of asking for help. The ancestors were believed to retain influence over the forces of nature and human fortune. A successful hunt, healthy children, or victory in a conflict might all be attributed to ancestral intervention. By maintaining this sacred site and performing the correct rituals, the living community was essentially paying a form of spiritual tax, ensuring the continued protection and blessing of their most powerful and knowledgeable allies, those who had come before them. In this view, Stonehenge becomes the ultimate family seat, a place where the wisdom of the past was actively consulted to navigate the challenges of the present and secure a prosperous future. But what if the sophistication of Stonehenge extends beyond astronomy and into the very language of the universe itself, mathematics? Our next theory proposes exactly that, suggesting the monument is a massive exercise in sacred geometry. Its layout based on complex principles like the Pythagorean theorem centuries before the Greek philosopher was even born. This idea pushes us to see the circle not just as a collection of stones, but as a geometric blueprint, a series of perfect shapes and right angles encoded into the earth. Archaeoastronomers and surveyors studying the site have noted that the key positions of the stones aren't arranged at random. They appear to form precise geometric shapes. By drawing imaginary lines between specific stones, one can find the outlines of rectangles, ovals, and, most strikingly, perfect right-angled triangles where the square of the hypotenuse equals the sum of the squares of the other two sides. The consistency of these shapes, emerging from the ground plan again and again, is difficult to dismiss as mere coincidence. To understand the significance of this, we need to step away from our modern view of mathematics as a purely practical tool for engineering or accounting. For the Neolithic mind, geometry was likely something far more profound, a sacred language. They would have observed perfect geometric forms in nature, the hexagonal cells of a honeycomb, the spiral of a nautilus shell, the circular ripples from a dropped stone, and seen in them the invisible hand of a creator, a fundamental order underlying the chaos of the world. Discovering that they could recreate these perfect shapes using simple ropes and stakes would have been a revelation. It was a way to tap into that divine order to bring cosmic harmony down to earth. Building a monument based on these perfect forms, therefore, wasn't an academic exercise, it was a spiritual act. They were constructing a temple according to the same mathematical principles they believed govern the cosmos, making Stonehenge a physical echo of the universe's hidden architecture. The practical method for achieving this would have been elegant in its simplicity. The builders wouldn't have needed parchment or numbers, they had rope. Using a long, knotted rope as a giant compass, they could easily create perfect circles and arcs. To form a perfect right angle, the foundation of so many of these proposed geometric shapes, they could use a simple but effective trick. Take a rope and tie 12 equally spaced knots. If 3 people hold the rope taut at the 3rd, 7th, and 12th knots, they will form a perfect triangle with a right angle opposite the longest side. This 3-4-5 triangle is the simplest example of the Pythagorean theorem in action, a technique known to ancient Egyptians and quite possibly to the megalithic builders of Britain. With this simple tool, teams could lay out the entire complex foundation of Stonehenge with astonishing accuracy, translating abstract mathematical perfection into a permanent stone reality. So why go to all this trouble? The purpose was likely symbolic, an expression of a deep philosophical belief. By encoding these perfect shapes into their most important monument, the builders were making a profound statement about their place in the cosmos. The circle could represent the cyclical nature of time and the heavens. The central rectangle might symbolize the ordered world of the living, and the Pythagorean triangles connecting these different realms could signify the harmonious link between the earthly and the divine. The entire structure becomes a mandala, a cosmic diagram meant to be walked and experienced, reinforcing the idea that human society, the natural world, and the celestial realm were all part of a single, beautifully interlocking system of divine proportion. In this light, Stonehenge is more than a calendar or a temple. It is a philosophical argument written in stone, a 5,000-year-old testament to humanity's enduring quest to find order, meaning, and harmony in the universe. Of all the theories we've explored, perhaps none is more deeply embedded in the popular imagination than the idea that Stonehenge was built by the ancient Druids. It's a romantic and powerful image, white-robed priests with long beards conducting mystical rites within the stone circle as the solstice sun rises. However, this enduring belief is based on a significant historical mix-up, one that separates the monument's construction by centuries, even millennia, from the Celtic priests who later became so famous. To set the record straight, we need to look at the timeline. The major phases of Stonehenge's construction took place between approximately 3,000 and 2,000 years before the Common Era, firmly in the Neolithic and early Bronze Age. The Druids, on the other hand, were the priestly class of the Celtic societies that emerged in Britain during the Iron Age, only appearing on the historical scene around 2,500 years ago. By the time the Druids were active, Stonehenge had already been an ancient, abandoned ruin for over 1,000 years. There is no archaeological evidence, no artifacts, no carvings, no Celtic burials from that time to connect them to its construction. So how did this mistaken association become so widespread? The story begins in the 17th century with a pioneering but ultimately mistaken antiquarian named John Aubrey. While conducting one of the first serious surveys of Stonehenge, Aubrey noted the similarities between the monument and stone circles mentioned in classical texts about the Celts. He speculated without concrete proof that it was a Druid temple. This idea was then dramatically popularized a century later by William Stukely, an antiquarian and vicar often called the father of landscape archaeology. Stukely was fascinated by Druids and wrote a highly influential book, Stonehenge, a temple restored to the British Druids. Living in an era that romanticized the noble savage and a pure, natural religion uncorrupted by modern society, Stukely reinvented the Druids as peaceful, monotheistic patriarchs, wise philosophers of nature who he believed were the original biblical patriarchs of Britain. He saw Stonehenge as the perfect physical proof of their sophisticated faith, and his vivid writings captured the public's imagination, creating a link that proved incredibly difficult to break. The theory's persistence is a testament to the power of a good story. The image of the wise Druid communing with nature at a timeless stone circle was far more appealing to the romantic sensibilities of the 18th and 19th centuries than the vague idea of anonymous, primitive, ancient Britons. It provided a charismatic, identifiable group of people to credit for the marvel, fitting it neatly into a nationalistic narrative. This fictional history was further cemented by the annual gatherings of modern Druidic orders, which began in the early 20th century. Groups like the Ancient Order of Druids started holding ceremonies at Stonehenge, particularly for the summer solstice, consciously adopting the monument as their spiritual home. Through photographs and media coverage, the sight of modern-day Druids in robes at the stones reinforced the connection in the public mind, creating a feedback loop where a modern invention of tradition was mistaken for an ancient one. This theory, while historically inaccurate, is fascinating for what it reveals about us. It's a perfect case study in cultural appropriation, not in a negative sense, but in the human tendency to find meaning in ancient monuments by layering them with new stories. The Druids of the Iron Age never worshipped at Stonehenge, but modern Druids do, and for them, its power and sanctity are very real. They have, in a way, reclaimed it, filling its ancient silence with new prayers and rituals that resonate with their own spiritual beliefs. This demonstrates that the significance of a place like Stonehenge is not fixed in the past. It is a living, evolving entity. Each generation projects its own hopes, fears, and beliefs onto the stones, using them as a canvas for its own identity. The Druidic theory may be a historical anachronism, but it highlights a profound truth, that the true endurance of Stonehenge lies not just in its physical stones, but in its endless capacity to inspire the human spirit across the ages. Returning to the fascinating sonic properties of the stones, we can take the idea of a lithophone even further, into the very physics of the space itself. This theory suggests that Stonehenge was not just a collection of ringing rocks, but a carefully engineered acoustic chamber, a giant sound amplifier designed to manipulate sound in ways that would have profoundly altered the experience of any ritual. Recent scientific studies using sophisticated sound modeling and on-site testing have revealed something remarkable about the stone circle's architecture. The massive, densely packed sarsen stones of the outer circle, combined with the inward-leaning lintels that once capped them, created a unique sonic environment. Sound waves generated within the circle would have reflected off the hard, smooth surfaces of the stones, bouncing around the enclosed space instead of escaping freely into the open air. This effect, known as reverberation, would have caused chants, drumbeats, or the ringing of the bluestones to hang in the air, blending together into a powerful, enveloping wall of sound that would have been felt as much as heard. This acoustic design had a crucial dual function, creating a stark divide between those inside the circle and those outside. A person standing at the very center, perhaps a shaman or high priest leading a ceremony, would have been able to speak in a relatively normal voice and be clearly heard by everyone else within the stone ring. The sound would be amplified and sustained by the reverberant space, giving even a whisper a certain weight and resonance. But for someone positioned just outside the circle, beyond the bank and ditch, the experience would have been completely different. The same speech or chant would have been muffled, indistinct, and significantly quieter. The stones acted as a sonic barrier containing the ritual's auditory core within the sacred space. This creates a compelling picture of a ritual with two distinct tiers of participation. A small, inner group of initiates experiencing the ceremony in its full, overwhelming sensory glory, and a larger, outer group of participants or observers who witnessed the event but were acoustically separated from its most intimate details. This deliberate control over sound transforms our understanding of ritual participation and the potential use of secret knowledge. The intense, immersive experience for those inside the circle, bathed in resonant sound that could disorient the senses and induce trance-like states, would have cemented their status as an elite group, those who had been granted access to the mysteries. The secrets chanted or the specific sequences in which the stones were struck would have remained private, their true meaning protected from the general populace. This acoustic privacy would have been a powerful tool for a priestly class, reinforcing their authority by creating a clear distinction between the knowledgeable few and the many. The monument, in this view, becomes an instrument of social control as much as spiritual connection, its very architecture ensuring that the most powerful aspects of the ritual remained exclusive and mystifying, enhancing the perceived power of those who presided within the ring of stone. While the sun's annual journey provides a steady, reliable rhythm, our next theory asks us to look to a more complex and subtle celestial dancer, the moon. This idea suggests that Stonehenge's architects were not only masters of solar time, but were also meticulously tracking the far more intricate and long-term cycles of our nearest celestial neighbor. The key to unlocking this lunar mystery lies not with the giant trilithons, but with four relatively modest stones known as the station stones, which once stood just inside the monument's massive outer bank, forming a near-perfect rectangle. While only two of these stones survive today, their positions are crucial. Archaeoastronomers have proposed that the long sides of this rectangle align with the most extreme rising and setting points of the Moon, events that mark the outer limits of its journey across our sky. Understanding this requires a shift in perspective from the annual solar cycle to a much grander timescale. The Sun's path is fairly constant. It rises and sets at roughly the same points on the horizon every year, only shifting slightly with the seasons. The Moon, however, is far more dynamic. Over a period of approximately 18.6 years, the Moon's rising and setting points slowly travel along the horizon, swinging from a maximum northern extreme to a maximum southern extreme before swinging back again. This is known as the lunar standstill cycle. At the peak of this cycle, for a few years, the Moon will rise and set at its very furthest possible points north and south, events that would have been dramatically visible against the flat horizon of Salisbury Plain. The station stone rectangle appears to frame these extreme positions, turning the entire monument into a giant foresight for predicting these rare lunar events. The implications of this are staggering. Tracking an 18.6-year cycle is an endeavor that spans generations. It requires a society with a sophisticated tradition of oral or symbolic knowledge transfer, where astronomical observations are carefully recorded and passed down from one generation of sky watchers to the next. A priest who began observing the Moon's movements as a young apprentice might only witness a single major standstill in their entire lifetime. This points to a culture with a profoundly long-term view of time, one that thought in terms of generations rather than single human lifespans. The ability to predict these lunar extremes would have been a demonstration of deep, accumulated wisdom, a power that would have seemed almost magical to the broader community. It suggests that the builders of Stonehenge saw the cosmos as a complex, interlocking system of cycles within cycles, and they engineered their great monument to be a physical expression of that cosmic order. So why would this long lunar cycle be so important? While the Sun governed the daily and seasonal patterns of life, the Moon held sway over different but equally vital rhythms. Its phases were intimately linked to tides, which would have been critical knowledge for communities living along coastlines or trading via rivers. Furthermore, the Moon's changing light dictated the rhythms of nighttime activity, from hunting to travel to ceremony. The major lunar standstill, occurring only once in a generation, would have been a moment of immense significance. It may have been a time for a massive pan-tribal gathering, a super ceremony that dwarfed even the annual solstice celebrations. The Moon, at its most extreme, might have been seen as a powerful, perhaps even dangerous, deity reaching the peak of its influence. The precise knowledge of when this would happen allowed the ruling elite to stage a correspondingly powerful ritual, once again demonstrating their command over the forces of nature and reinforcing their spiritual and political authority for another generation to come. This theory elevates Stonehenge from a sophisticated solar calendar to a truly cosmic clock, capable of measuring the slow, majestic heartbeat of the Moon itself. This idea encourages us to pull our focus back from the stones themselves and to view the monument as part of a much larger, carefully designed ritual landscape. Stonehenge was not an isolated temple. It was the dramatic climax of a spiritual journey, the final destination in a vast sacred complex that orchestrated the experience of every pilgrim who approached it. The most compelling feature supporting this is the avenue, a long, parallel pair of banks and ditches that stretches for nearly 2 miles from the stone circle down to the River Avon. This was not a casual footpath. Its construction was a deliberate, monumental effort, creating a formal processional way that channeled movement across the landscape. The avenue doesn't follow the most direct route to the river. Instead, it curves gracefully, framing specific vistas and building anticipation, much like the approach to a great cathedral. This was a pathway designed not for efficiency but for ceremony. We can piece together the likely steps of this ancient pilgrimage. Imagine groups of people traveling from distant regions, perhaps following ancient trackways that converged on the river Avon. They would have embarked on boats journeying along the sacred waterway, which in many ancient beliefs was seen as a boundary between the ordinary world and the spirit world. Their journey would have culminated at a landing point where they disembarked to begin the final, most sacred leg of their travel on foot. As they started their walk along the avenue, the stone circle would have been hidden from view, still nestled below the horizon. The path itself, with its banks rising on either side, would have focused their attention forward, creating a sense of separation from the mundane world and building a powerful sense of expectation with every step. Then, at a specific point on the avenue, the crest of the hill would have been reached, and the entire magnificent structure of Stonehenge would have suddenly risen into view on the horizon ahead. This carefully staged revelation would have been a moment of profound awe and spiritual climax, a visual reward for their long journey. The final approach would have been made directly toward the entrance of the circle, perfectly aligned with the rising sun on the summer solstice. This entire journey by water, a symbol of transition and purification, followed by a formal procession along a sacred path toward a revealed goal, was a powerful multi-sensory ritual in itself. It physically enacted a spiritual transition, moving the pilgrim from their everyday life into a heightened state of reverence before they even set foot inside the circle. The evidence for this pilgrimage theory is not just architectural, it's found in the very soil of the site. Archaeological excavations have uncovered a wealth of artifacts that did not originate locally. There are distinctive pottery styles from other regions of Britain, finely crafted flint tools from faraway sources, and even precious items like jet and amber that could only have come from the coast or across the sea. These objects are not the typical debris of a permanent settlement. They are the left-behind offerings of visitors. Some might have been ritual deposits, gifts to the gods or to the spirit of the place itself. Others may have been personal items lost or deliberately abandoned by pilgrims as a symbolic act of leaving their old selves behind before entering the sacred precinct. The sheer variety and distant origins of these finds paint a picture of a site that attracted people from across Britain and even from continental Europe, a true center of spiritual tourism that drew the faithful from hundreds of miles away. This transforms our understanding of Stonehenge's place in the prehistoric world. It was not just a local temple for the tribes of Salisbury Plain. It was the most important node in a vast sacred geography, a Neolithic equivalent of Mecca or Santiago de Compostela. Its power and reputation were such that it became a magnet for spiritual seekers across the continent. The construction of the avenue and the concentration of exotic artifacts suggest a sophisticated understanding of hospitality and ritual management. There would have been a need to accommodate these travelers, to guide them through the ceremonies and to maintain the sanctity of the approach. This theory portrays Stonehenge not as a silent, static circle, but as a living, breathing hub of spiritual activity, a place whose true significance was realized through the footsteps of the countless pilgrims who traveled immense distances to reach it, their journeys adding yet another layer of meaning to the enduring stones. And now we arrive at our final and perhaps most spectacularly speculative theory, one that reaches beyond the boundaries of conventional history to suggest that Stonehenge is not merely a Neolithic marvel, but a solitary, enigmatic relic of a lost global civilization. This idea proposes that the builders were not the indigenous people of prehistoric Britain, but survivors or descendants of a vastly advanced pan-global culture that flourished in a forgotten age, only to be erased from memory by a cataclysmic event, a story that echoes the enduring legend of Atlantis. Proponents of this theory argue that the sheer sophistication of Stonehenge is an anomaly that cannot be comfortably explained within the accepted timeline of human development. They point to the stunning precision of the stonework, the way the massive sarcens were shaped using techniques that we still don't fully understand, the complex mortise and tenon joints that lock the lintels securely atop the uprights, and the breathtakingly accurate celestial alignments that required generations of meticulous astronomical observation. To these thinkers, these achievements seem to burst forth from the archaeological record with no clear, gradual evolution of skills. The standard narrative of hunter-gatherers slowly transitioning to farming and then, almost miraculously, organizing themselves to build one of the world's most enduring monuments feels to them like an insufficient explanation. They posit that such a leap in engineering, mathematics, and astronomy implies a pre-existing base of knowledge, a technical legacy inherited from a much older, more advanced society that was swept away by a global deluge, a comet impact, or some other planetary disaster. This theory is compelling precisely because it functions as the ultimate mystery box. When faced with an enigma as profound as Stonehenge, it offers a tantalizingly simple, albeit grand, solution. It explains one great mystery by invoking an even greater one. Instead of struggling with the complex, incremental story of how Neolithic Britons achieved this feat, it suggests we are looking at the work of master architects from a golden age, whose other wonders now lie beneath the oceans or buried under millennia of silt. This narrative taps into a deep-seated human fascination with sunken cities and fallen empires, a romantic notion that our history is far older and more dramatic than the textbooks allow. It transforms Stonehenge from a magnificent human achievement into a haunting message in a bottle, a lone, cryptic clue to a world we can only imagine. Mainstream archaeology, of course, stands firmly against this interpretation. The evidence from decades of meticulous excavation paints a very different and in many ways more impressive picture. The development of Stonehenge was not a sudden event but a process that unfolded over more than 1,000 years. We can trace its evolution from a simple circular earthwork and timber structure to the final stone monument. The tools used to work the stone mauls, antler picks, and sandstone grinding tools have been found at the site. The quarries for the bluestones in Wales and the sarcens in West Woods have been identified, with unfinished stones and extraction pits providing clear evidence of the methods used. Furthermore, the cultural context is rich and well documented. We see similar, if smaller, stone circles and monumental architecture across the British Isles and Brittany, showing that the people of Neolithic Europe were part of a dynamic, interconnected cultural sphere capable of incredible communal projects. The achievement of Stonehenge is not an anomaly. It is the pinnacle of a long, observable tradition of monument building. Ultimately, the power of the lost civilization theory lies less in its archaeological credibility and more in what it reveals about our own relationship with the deep past. It speaks to a sense that history, as recorded by fragments of pottery and post holes, might have missed something monumental. It satisfies a yearning for a more epic, more mysterious human story, one filled with advanced seafarers, global cataclysms, and knowledge lost to time. While the scientific evidence firmly roots Stonehenge in the soil of Neolithic Europe, built by the hands of our resourceful and determined ancestors, the theory of a lost civilization ensures that the monument retains its aura of ultimate mystery. It reminds us that even as we uncover more and more answers, Stonehenge will always hold a space for the grandest of questions, forever challenging us to wonder if we have truly uncovered all the secrets of our own story. So there you have it, 25 distinct theories that range from the scientifically plausible to the wildly speculative, each one striving to crack the ancient code of Stonehenge. What is truly incredible is how this single, silent circle of stones can inspire such a vast spectrum of ideas, touching upon astronomy, religion, power, healing, and even the possibility of extraterrestrial life. It stands as a powerful testament to the enduring grip this ancient puzzle has on the human imagination. After journeying through these possibilities, from the monument as a Neolithic astronomical computer to a sacred burial ground for a royal dynasty, and from a massive trading hub to a potential portal to other worlds, one thing becomes beautifully clear. Maybe the true purpose of Stonehenge isn't just one single definable thing, but a complex combination of many purposes that evolved over its thousand-year construction. It could have been an observatory, a temple, a cemetery, and a political statement all at once, its meaning shifting with each generation that gathered within its ring. The stones themselves hold the final answer, and they have kept their secret for 5,000 years. We want to hear from you now. Which of these theories bends your mind the most? Does the idea of it being a sophisticated lunar calendar resonate with you, or are you captivated by the notion of it being a place of powerful sonic rituals? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of history's greatest enigmas, be sure to subscribe for more journeys into the world's most captivating history.